So today's webinar is Teacher Education Strand, and it's called Am I Good Enough? And our speaker is Paula Medina, who I'm going to introduce properly in a moment. So before we get started properly, the webinar recordings can be found at the link below here. And these slides will go on the website along with the recording. You can find this site also just by looking up Transformative Teachers, and this is the place you'll come to. On your screen, you should be able to see the slides and myself and Paula, but your video and microphones are muted. So if you would like to communicate with us or with each other, then please, you can type in the chat, or you can put any questions in the Q&A box. So the chat can move very quickly. If you use the Q&A, then we will be able to see those questions and they won't get lost. Okay, so just to check everybody can hear us, could you please put in the chat what time it is currently where you are? Here where I am, it's just gone 4 o'clock. Wow, I just saw 10:30 in the evening in one place. 5 p.m.
Yes, I'm the same time zone as Lucy. I'm in the UK, so
wow.
11 p.m. Wow.
All over the world.
Yes,
it's really exciting.
Incredible.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, but I can see those times all coming in there. Okay, so my name is Lucy Muirhead. I'm taking the baton from Martin Ottogen, who was organising the webinars last year, and I'm going to keep the same style as much as we can, the discursive conversational style, because I think it's a really nice way to do the webinars. But this year it's different because we have external speakers. So today we have got Paula, and Paula is a freelance teacher. She taught in the UK for many years, and then she was headhunted by the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, where she's originally from, and she was asked to design and deliver teacher training courses, which she has done. And then she comes back in the summer, often to teach at the local university, and she does a whole range of things now. So I will pass over to Paula to begin. Paula, do you have screen sharing?
Yes, I'm going to share in a minute. I just would like to say thank you very much for sparing a minute of your busy teaching schedule. Yes, a minute of your time to be here with us. And I would like to send a massive congratulations to all the teachers out there who did amazingly over the pandemic, having to reinvent yourselves. You know, it's been a tough job for us teachers, right? But I think everybody did well. So massive congratulations to everybody. So I'm going to share my screen now with you guys, and sharing. Yeah, just bear with me. Okay. So I'm going to start by asking a very important question, because today, of course, this seminar is from the eyes of a non-native speaker. As you guys know, I'm from Brazil. So I want to, before we understand something more about a non-native speaker, I would like to ask you this question: who is a native speaker? So I've left up there, the British flag, the Union Jack, for a reason, because for most people that I ask this question, who is a native speaker, they say the British, of course. The British colonized most, of the English-speaking countries. So yeah, but I throw the question back to you guys. So who do you think is a native speaker? Do you think is only a British person? Oh, hang on a second. I'm trying to move my slide, and I think there is a little bit of a, okay, I'm using the arrow, sorry. Yes, so is it someone who is born in an English-speaking country? Yeah, maybe. Is it someone who speaks English as their first language, L1? Or is it someone who holds a passport from any of the 67 countries where English is considered the official language? Let's say, for instance, I hold 3 passports because my mom is Brazilian, so I've got a Brazilian passport. My father is Spanish, I've got a Spanish passport, and I got married to a British man, so I've got a British passport. So does that make me a native speaker just because I hold a British passport? So there we have this question, right? So I want you to.
Oh, Paula, can I just pause you a moment? Sorry, I just see in the chat that there's lots of thoughts on what is a native speaker.
Please.
And if we say that someone who speaks English is their L1 or their mother tongue, the thing is that in itself can even be complicated, because let's say somebody is born in an English-speaking country, maybe to English-speaking parents, and they live there until they're maybe 3 years old, and then they move to another country. Or let's say their parents are from other places, to make it simpler, but they're born in that country and they start off by learning the local language, but then they move. So they may grow up with that as their first language, but actually it's not their strongest. And if they return later on, they may find it hard to communicate. And certainly, I think it may be if their parents are native speakers and they always speak with them, then that's something else. But what if they move to another country when they're 7? Are they a native speaker because they're so young, or are they not? So absolutely. I find it quite a complicated question.
That's a very complicated question, Lucy, and you are absolutely right. Yeah, so I think these are all questions for us to reflect on. Yeah, so who is a native speaker? So if it's very difficult to define who a native speaker is, I think it's quite important that we understand about the English language as well. So I have a little question there for you guys. Do you think the English spoken in the Philippines is the same as the English spoken in the UK? What did you say? Sorry, I cannot see the chat box, but Lucy, you can be my eyes, yeah? So did anyone say if they think the
English? Most of them are no. There's a yes in here. It's moving very quickly. There's some definitely nots.
Okay. So I have never been to the Philippines, but I've got a good friend, a Brazilian good friend of mine, who worked there for many years, and he guarantees to me the English that we speak in England is totally different to the English they speak in the Philippines. They have their own set of grammatical rules, and they just apply these rules to their reality. So I can
see in the chat box people are talking about accent and also dialect. And they're sharing their own experiences of their languages within their family. It's very interesting. It's moving very quickly, but what I'm catching is fascinating. Sorry, Paula, carry on.
So let's move on. So before, I want you to just hold on this question about the language, because we're going to go back to that in a minute. But before that, I thought about sharing a little bit about my experience teaching English in Brazil first and then in the UK. So teaching English in Brazil was mainly for monolingual classes. Yes, I taught at different language centers and universities. And of course, when you guys, if you work and teach English in your country, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We have a big problem, which is the excessive use of L1 and probably not much use of the target language, right? Because of course, whenever a student has got a problem or has an issue or cannot understand, they switch back to L1. So I found this for me was very challenging to keep my Brazilian students from speaking Portuguese, refrain them from speaking Portuguese, keep them to speak English. So I found this very challenging. Please share your thoughts as well. If you want to be an English teacher in Brazil, all you need in terms of teaching requirements is a BA, a bachelor degree in English. Yeah, you don't need to show any TOEFL certification, nothing like that, just a university degree. Yeah. Yes, of course, if the university is to do with language, English teaching or English language is even better. And of course, it's very important to consider students' expectations. So if you think that 80% of English teachers on the planet are non-native speakers, yeah, so you would think that your students' expectations when you are teaching them in their country and in your home country, it's fine, because they are not expecting any different. They're expecting to have, in my case, a Brazilian teacher or a speaker, a Portuguese speaker, yeah, teaching them English, right? So that, I think that was absolutely fine. And for me, I thought overall, my teaching experience in Brazil was plain sailing, was like with not many bumps on my road. Yes, Luz?
So oh, first I just want to apologize that I'm in such shadow. The light bulb seems to have gone in the lamp, so I'm in darkness this this month as the light fades outside in this winter, English winter. I see that somebody in the chat is saying that it's also a big challenge when the teachers are using L1 in the classroom.
Oh yes, of course. Of course. I mean, but as teachers, we should try to make the most of our target language, right? But of course, there are lots of things to be considered, like the level of your class. And, you know, let's say if somebody is preparing to take an exam and you just need to get them ready, so you just need to go through some reading strategies, for instance, then maybe you can make use of L1. But I think we should, as teachers, we should try to use English as much as we can, right, Luz?
I think so. I think you're right. I think that these days the current thinking is that L1 is an important part of language learning. So to ban it from the classroom feels quite unnatural. And I know that as a learner, when I was learning Italian, sometimes I just wanted that quick translation. If I was really stuck and I wasn't understanding the context and I was missing the whole lesson, I just wanted to quickly check a word. And it was helping me in my overall learning. So it certainly has a role to play. It's just about the balance, isn't it,
Absolutely,
Paula?
you are absolutely right. And I am totally in favor of using like a bilingual dictionary. Why not? Why do you need to go through all the English information and then you need more words to find out? So yeah, use a bilingual dictionary, of course, L1 dictionary. But I think inside the classroom, if you want to improve your speaking, if you want to improve your listening, there's no point in you using L1 only, right? So I don't know.
And I think, of course, there are big limitations with the dictionary, especially when it comes to English, when one word in one language has 3 words in English. So it's context dependent, isn't it?
Yeah,
So Paula,
absolutely.
what about in the UK? What's your experience?
So my teaching experience in the UK was the opposite, the other end of the spectrum, actually, because I had mainly multicultural classes. I remember my first class in Brighton was about 70% Arabic students, about 10% South Koreans, another 10% Chinese, and the rest South American. Yeah. So it was like a wonderful experience to suddenly have all different cultures and languages inside a classroom. So it was quite a little bit of a shock to the system, but it was quite a pleasant shock. Yeah. Then, of course, nobody was speaking Portuguese, like in my case, yeah, they are one. Nobody using Portuguese. They were using, of course, if they were sitting next to somebody that shared the same nationality, they always try to use their L1. But it was almost non-existent, the use of L1 compared to my teaching experience in Brazil, right? And if you guys are interested in applying for a job in England, of course, you need to check all about visa requirements. But in terms of teaching requirements, all you need to provide is a TEFL certification. I've got the name of two, the best ones. I don't know if I can say that, but Trinity, TESOL and CELTA, Cambridge CELTA. These are the most popular, I think, the most accepted ones in the UK. Now, that is where the next bullet point is where my problems started a bit in the UK, is when I started reflecting about my students' expectations. So I try to put myself in their shoes. So I'm a student from, let's say, Italy, coming to England to learn English. What are my expectations? Who am I going to expect to be my teacher? Of course, a British person, maybe. Yeah, I think that's a natural thing. I'm coming to England. I want to improve my English, and I want to probably speak as much like with native speakers as I can. So then, because of this, I started thinking about student expectation, I started opening this Pandora's box, because I started self-doubting myself. I started, all these questions started to arise about, oh my God, should they be having lesson with a native speaker? Am I good enough? And things like that. So this, sorry, Luz, do you want to say something here before I move on?
There were a couple of things. First of all, I spoke to a few other ex-colleagues of mine about, who are also non-native speakers, about their experiences of teaching in the UK and abroad. And one of my friends from Italy, she found that when she went back, when she was trying to look for a job there as an Italian with a really high level of English, a lot of the schools were advertising or looking for native speakers. And she found that quite tricky, because it's obviously sending out that message, oh look, we're a great school because we have native speakers. And she's an excellent teacher. She would have no problems at all, but I think maybe it made it a little bit harder for her to find a job, which was a real shame. So I think we're going to be talking, aren't we, about how it's nice to have a mix of both, because any school, if you've or, you know, or in a way it doesn't matter where somebody's from, whether they're native or not, it's about the teaching.
It's about the teaching. It's all about the teaching. You are absolutely right, Luz, and that's such a shame.
Oh, Paula, sorry, one more. I've just seen somebody in the chat box saying where's it gone? I'm a native speaker and I don't feel like I'm good enough. We're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about that too, because that's exactly, I think, what we found, Paula and I, when we were discussing this last week in preparation. We found that really, when you put things on the scales, everybody's got their own strengths and weaknesses. Oh, I'm ever so sorry. I realized because we started a little late, I didn't even say how long we're going to be today. So this is when I was 45 minutes. So we should be done by 4:45. There'll be Q&A at the end. So I think it's easiest to answer the questions in the Q&A box at the end of this, just to keep things moving, if that's all right. Paula.
What I was just going to say is that there are a few movements online on YouTube. There are quite a few non-native speakers. They are raising this movement. Why, for instance, by law, for you to teach in China, you can only teach in China if you are a native speaker of English. So that I've read and I've seen some videos. There's a massive movement out there.
Do you mean people who want to travel over there to?
Yeah, so non-native speakers who would like to work in China, but they are not allowed by law, because apparently Chinese government by law would only hire.
If anybody has any information on that, please put it in the chat box. That's quite, I'm surprised by that.
Yes, but I've read that China and South Korea, they only hire like teachers who are native speaker, so they wouldn't hire me, for instance.
Okay, well, I don't know. I mean, let's see if anybody can.
Let's see if
tell us
anyone.
that. Yes. So
moving on.
Tell us about all of your doubts.
So my first question, of course, am I good enough? Oh my God! And then like my nightmare started a bit, because I started questioning everything that I know about English and all my English knowledge, and. So my first question, of course, is, do I know English well enough? Like, because you start looking at a native speaker as this godlike figure, and you start saying, oh, I would like to be like them. But of course, this is all in your mind, because in reality, we are all in the same boat, right? But there is this question, oh, how much do I know? Do I know well enough to be an English teacher? And I think most of you, you are going to agree with me that non-native speakers tend to be quite hot on their grammar, yeah? Because of course we have to learn the grammar step by step in order to learn the language. Whereas my husband, who is like British, a British person, English, yeah, he doesn't know what an adjective is. He doesn't know, like if I say, oh, can you give me an example using the present perfect? He said, what is the present perfect? He hasn't got a clue, but of course he used the present perfect all the time, right? So I think there is a tendency that non-native speakers tend to be quite confident with their grammar. Of course, guys, there are exceptions, but I think there is a tendency. But of course, when it comes to vocabulary, how can we non-native speakers compete to native speakers? Because like, I think any language, not only English language, any language, languages are very organic, very fluid. They change all the time. So if you don't live in the country, if you're not really like immersed in the culture, how can you compete? I'm using compete with inverted commas here, yeah? How can you compete with a native speaker who was born in their countries and I don't know, who has a whole range of vocabulary?
But it's
Right,
interesting.
yeah?
It's interesting though, isn't it, that actually, when it comes to what vocabulary students need, it really depends on so many things. And I found that my students would come out with things that they'd learned from other teachers that I would never say, but they'd learned it from other native speakers. So it made me really aware of how different my own vocabulary is from the next Brightonian. And yeah, the vocabulary that students need can be very, very different from what we maybe worry that they need. So I think it's very common for non-native speaker teachers to be particularly concerned about this, especially if they're teaching the higher levels. I've had other colleagues saying, what if they ask me something I don't know? Well, actually, sometimes my students would ask me a word that I don't know. And I said to them, if I don't know what this word means, it probably isn't that useful. It's not a very high frequency.
Lucy, that's exactly what I say to my students. I said, look, I've been teaching English for over 25 years. So if I don't know this word, you don't need to know. Let's move on.
Yeah, and I think that students have to be really careful that they're not overloading their brains with things that they don't know. They need to be selective. It's so tempting to just check every word. What does this mean? What does that mean? But it's like Homer Simpson says from the Simpsons cartoon, every time I learn something new, it pushes something old out of my brain. So I tell my students, don't learn every single thing. Focus on what's useful, especially what's useful for you now. At the stage you're at, you need, if you're pre-intermediate, you need a range of pre-intermediate vocabulary. Don't try and learn too many things higher than that, because it'll get in the way of your communication.
Absolutely. Okay. Very good. So it's next point, next question, yeah? Because remember, I opened Pandora's box. What if they ask me something I don't know? Oh, so this is actually linked, yeah, to that one. Remember, Luz, we were saying, do students expect us to be a walking dictionary? Yeah.
And some students do.
Yeah, some students do. So let's move to the next one. Will the students have a problem with my accent? Yeah, so this is something quite interesting, because of course, if English is not your first language, you are going to have an accent. It doesn't matter how good your English is, how well you speak English, but you are going to have an accent, even if you try to copy, you know, so you can try to mimic like a native person. Sometimes I catch myself doing that. But even if you do that, there are some moments, there are some words that is going to, you know, just reveal that you are not a native speaker. But, you know, that is the question I want to bring. Is this really a problem to have an accent?
Well, and when we talk about having an accent, everybody has an accent of some
Everybody,
sort, don't
yes.
they? Native or non-native. And my accent is quite messy, I think. I've got a little bit of Northern English vowels, a little bit of Southern ones. I think I lived in different parts of the UK, so I picked up different accents from there. And then because I spent so much of my time with students from other countries, I think I picked up bits of their accents as well. And
Right.
sometimes even their incorrect grammar. It's incredible. I have to sometimes check, do we actually say this? So everybody's got an accent. And in the UK especially, there's a lot of accents that are really different, even within a few hours driving radius of each other. And so
Oh
at the
no,
schools that I've worked at, there's always been teachers with very, very different accents. So an accent is just part of who you are.
it's part of
And,
who you are.
and
So I think,
yeah,
yeah, it's part of your identity. So I don't think we should be embarrassed or ashamed of our accent, right? I think we should embrace it. I've got an accent. Yes, everybody does, right? And you mentioned England, even in England, but in the UK as well. I've got a good friend who is Welsh, and she's got a lovely accent. I just adore her accent. And it's just like yeah, like which accent is the correct accent? There's no such thing like that,
I
right,
think
Luz?
intelligibility is obviously important. So if we move
Absolutely.
to a point where people can't understand us, then I suppose it's causing a problem. But it's very difficult to say which accents are intelligible, because I think that research does find that when you have a group of non-native speakers together and then a native speaker joins, then suddenly the overall communication and level of mutual intelligibility can go down.
Exactly, because
Um,
everybody feels threatened.
or it may just be that they can't understand the native speaker's accent or speed. Maybe with each other, they're making allowances to help each other to understand their points. And maybe a native speaker who doesn't speak another language may be less aware of what that's like and how they can do it. So it's just the way it goes. But
Mhm.
but I think that it's very, how can we say which accent is the best accent to have? Of
Yeah,
course,
we
I think it's
can.
about changing our mindset rather than changing our accents.
That's the
Um,
point.
Paula, a couple of other interesting things have
Yeah,
come up. I just want to touch on one thing in the
yeah,
chat box.
yeah.
I see that some people are saying that they feel as, I think they need to be ready for students questions
Right.
in the classroom if they're a non-native speaker. Would you like to say anything else about that? So do you feel that non-native
Well,
speakers need to prepare more to be ready?
I don't think so. I think if you are a native speaker or non-native speaker, you need to prepare for the lesson you're going to teach, right? So, of course, if you are probably let's say you are going to teach about phobias. Yeah, so you have an article about phobias, about fears, and so of course you need to make sure you understand all the words in that article. Yeah, and maybe this is not going to be an issue with native speakers because I'm sure they know all the words from that text. But yes, as long as you know everything, you know whatever is in the text that you are using, it's fine. But in terms of preparing, I think it doesn't matter if you are a native speaker or a non-native speaker, you need to be prepared for a lesson. Do you agree?
I do. Yes. And I
Yeah,
certainly know, I identify with the person in the chat who said that they felt that they weren't good enough as a native speaker, because I certainly worried for many, many years
yeah.
about my teaching. And I felt that I really needed to prepare everything, and I needed to show that I was organized and show that I had thought about all the different needs of the students. But I started to realize that it was taking me more out of touch with them and what they needed. And it was only when I actually started to prepare a bit less and be a little bit more ready to go with the flow that I started to see more what the students actually needed and to
Mm-hmm.
connect with them a little bit more. So I think it was a
Yes.
combination of experience and then trusting in my own style
Absolutely.
as a
Yeah,
teacher.
absolutely. I think we tend to prepare loads when we start teaching. Yeah. And then you realize through experience, well, actually, my students don't need all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
on many cases, less is more, right?
I think so. So
Yeah.
Paula, I'm very aware of the time. We
Yeah.
don't actually,
Let's move on.
don't have
Yeah.
much time. I'm
Sure.
thinking when we talked last week, there was a particular there's a particular slide that you have there that's relating what we can learn from
Yes.
each other. Would you mind?
Yeah.
Do you think we could go to that? Because we've only got
Yeah.
about 5 minutes before we need
Okay,
to go to the
it's
Q&A.
okay. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So I'm just going to finish this question. So am I what students want? Yeah, so these were all the questions in my head. And am I as good as a native speaker? So all these questions. And the answer is, guys, yes, you are good enough. You have been through the same journey as your learner because you had to learn the language. You can understand the language on a conscious level because you had to study these. Like I said, you had to go through the present perfect. So you know how to teach the present perfect because you had to study yourself. Oh, it's have or has plus verb 3 or past participle. So you understand the language on a conscious level. You have an advantage regarding learning strategies. Of course you do, because you had to learn the language yourself. You are slightly better at anticipating learners' difficulties. You are a living model to your students. I think this is very important because your student will look at you and say, oh, I want to be like her. Like if she can do this, I can. So I think this is quite important. And you can really empathize with your learners' frustrations because you've been there, you had this same frustration. I'm moving really quickly. I want to bear in mind that we live in a global world. And if you think that more than 3/4 of English speakers are non-native speakers, which is around 2 billion, 350 million English speakers are native. So do you think your learners are very likely going to be speaking English with native speakers? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think this is really key because a lot of students,
Let's just go
they
back there,
when they
sorry.
come to in my experience, when they come to the UK, they want to learn what local people are saying, which I understand that desire. I can only help to a certain extent because if they ask me what the teenagers on the bus are talking about, I've got no idea.
There you are.
and then most of the time they're going to be using English in an international context, aren't they? And so
Absolutely.
I hope I'm not
Absolutely. And
stepping on your toes here,
no,
Paula.
no, no, no. And this leads to my next question. What do students need? So students need international communication. Students need real and meaningful communication. They need the real life language skills. They need the skills for life. So what English are we supposed to teach them? Of course, we are supposed to teach them international English, or if you want to say global English. Yeah, so we are not supposed to teach them British English or American English or Australian English. We are teaching them international English.
I have to catch myself with this because sometimes when I was in the classroom, I was very tempted to teach lots of little idioms. And I know students love learning those, and it is part of the language. And at a really high level, then they are useful. But it's not necessarily what the students need the most. And nowadays, I think I focus more, first of all, on those skills that they really need. Well, I hope I do, that's my aim, but it's maybe it's harder for me to see that a little bit as a native speaker than perhaps for you as someone who's been through that journey. I don't know.
So what is our job as language teachers, non-native speakers and native speakers? Yeah. We need to create a friendly learning environment where the affective filter remains as low as possible. We need to let our students feel comfortable to experiment the language. So it doesn't matter if we are native speaker or non-native speaker.
Well, Paula, can I just share a particular experience here? So when we were talking about this last week, it reminded me of an experience that I had had as a learner of salsa, so I love going dancing. And I remember being in a salsa class and we were doing a particular kind of thing and I absolutely couldn't get it. I really, really struggled. And I was quite surprised by how it made me feel. I started to feel quite panicky, maybe a little bit angry as well. Like, why are they teaching us this? This is useless. We don't need this. and then why can't I do this? And, oh, I need to go home and practice. And, you know, I decided in that moment to step back from the class because I wasn't able to do what they were teaching, and to just spend some time noticing how I was feeling, because I realized, oh, have my students ever felt this way in my class? So I hope not.
Probably your affective filter was really high.
Yeah, so I think that it's talking with you it made me think about how valuable it is to be a learner of something.
Absolutely. It
Whether
doesn't have
it's
to be a language.
It's really good. And I think that even though I have been learners of things, it's when I'm learning at the same time as teaching, learning something, it always makes me stop and reflect. And it makes me think about
your students,
my students a lot, and what they actually need.
That's the same. That's the same for me. Okay, so our job is to empower our students to become independent learners, also to teach international English in a meaningful context, to identify your strengths as a teacher and focus on them, and to enjoy the ride. Of course, we must love what we do, and we must do what we love, right, Lucy?
Yeah.
And I have do you want to say something before I move on?
There's one other thing I wanted to fit in. I think you've gone through, you've kept the time very well, Paula. So when it comes to our strengths, I heard a very, very interesting podcast a few years ago that I would like to share, because it really made me stop and think. When we think about our strengths and weaknesses in a context like maybe an appraisal or in our jobs, we often think, okay, what am I not so good at and what can I do to get better at that? Great, fine. It's good to improve ourselves as much as we can. But we all have things that we will always be better at and other things we will always be worse at.
Always.
And we don't want to give too much energy to our weaknesses, because then we're not developing our strengths. So what the podcast said, why not focus more on your strengths and developing those things that you're really good at and making the most of those. And I think that as a teacher, that's what I found, that certainly when it came to preparation, what helped me to prepare, spend less time worrying about preparation, was realizing I can't be all things to all people. I'm actually pretty good at teaching grammar, but I'm not very good at teaching pronunciation. So I just do more grammar and less pronunciation. And I think other teachers are good at that in the school. They can go to them. So there's things that I can give my students and things I can't. But that's helped me to be a happier, and I'm sure a better teacher, but happier, when I actually let go of some of those worries and just accepted that I'm not going to be good at all things, and that's okay.
You cannot, that's impossible. And I 100% agree with you. Let us focus on our strengths and not our weaknesses. And try to develop those. What a great podcast. And finally, the last question: does it really matter if you are a native or non-native speaker of English? Well, the answer is no, right? Okay, thank you, everybody. We have some questions now. Time for questions.
Q&A.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to have a bit of water.
Yeah, me too.
So first of all, this just to reiterate, the style of this this series is more conversational than other kinds of presentations. So it's not just a presentation. The idea is there's a bit of a dialogue happening. So that's why I'm jumping in there with Paula. I'm just continuing the style of last year, but I think that yes, obviously we've had a little less time today. But Paula, thank you very much for, I think, getting through all of the key points there, and we're going to have a look at the Q&A.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I rushed a bit.
So that reminds me, the first thing is that I will just put in the chat box the link that you can use to find all of the these webinars. Sorry, I'm searching and thinking at the same time. Okay, so
Should
if
I
you want to
stop
watch the
sharing my screen,
recording,
Luz? I'm stop
you
sharing
could
now.
do, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, I'll put in the chat box then the website. So I hope you guys can grab that.
Luz,
So,
somebody's asking what affective filter is. Should I explain
yes,
this?
please, yes.
So affective filter is something like all of us have got. Yes. So when you're learning something, you must feel really relaxed, because if you are feeling anxious, if you are nervous, if you are tense, if you are scared, that means we build like a little wall in front of us. So there's a natural, if you are learning anything, not only English, guys, if you're learning anything like Lucy's example, learning how to dance, and if you are not comfortable, if the environment is not letting you explore all your abilities, and it's like an unfriendly environment, you are going to build a little invisible wall. So this is like you are going to raise your affective filter. But of course, our job, I believe, is to bring this wall down and make everybody comfortable, and and in a friendly environment. So yeah, I think that's clear. Yeah.
So thank
Any
you,
other
Paula.
questions?
There's a couple of just quick questions here. So somebody's asking if this webinar provides a certificate of attendance, and we don't with these webinars, because these are not so much training webinars as sharing best practice. They're a community, an opportunity to join in the community. So so I hope that the webinars are useful and worth your while coming along to nonetheless. And we hope to see you in future ones. Other key things, I think some things might be points that also would go in the chat box. There's some really specific questions like teaching to young learners, and I'm afraid it's a bit difficult, I think, for Paula to answer, because you don't teach young learners, do you? But there will be webinars on young learners, so make sure you sign up to those ones.
And some questions like, what's the best way to teach grammar? This would be another webinar.
That's a difficult one to.
Yeah.
We don't currently have upcoming webinars for teaching grammar, but the diary for the full year isn't complete yet. So do check back and see. I will tell you in a moment what the next webinar will be about. Paula, can you give us some tips to succeed in interviews as non-native speakers?
Well, how to succeed in interviews? Well, you just needed to prepare yourself. I mean, if you're going for a job interview, you're going to study about the company, about the requirements, about the skills needed, and you just prepare yourself. But, and I think my tip to anyone who is a native speaker or non-native speaker is just be yourself, follow your guts, follow your instinct, and believe in yourself, because you can be your worst enemy if you start doubting yourself. So don't let these fears and these things that is only inside your head hold you back from moving on.
I think that's a really, really important point, because whenever I speak to non-native speaker teachers and they tell me their worries, it turns out that their worries come from inside rather than from somewhere external.
Only so their head.
It's most of the time, it might be a little comment that somebody said to them that made them doubt everything. But actually, it's their own worries that are holding them back rather than what's going on. And most of the experience tells them that the students generally, they're happy, and they look up to somebody who's a non-native speaker, because they can see that you've achieved what they want to achieve. So I think that confidence is probably the main thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's one last question here. What's the best way of activating the learner's schema? So I think from my experience, using images. So the moment you put an image there, I think learner's schemata is already activated, because all of us, we are very visual beings. So I think once you make the most of visuals. So let's say, oh, today's lesson is going to be about shopping. So I don't know, put pictures of objects that people go shopping for, or oh, today's lesson is going to be about food. So pictures of food on the board, yeah? Visuals, very important to activate schemata.
Okay, thank you, Paula. So there's one more question, but I'm going to combine that with the last comment of the webinar. So next month, the webinar is given by me, and it's going to be on the topic of practicing language with minimal preparation for the teacher, but maximum benefit for the student by using the students as a resource. So I do this a lot when it comes to teaching grammar or practicing grammar especially. So somebody is asking in the Q&A about how to go with the flow in terms of lesson planning. So that will be part of the next webinar. It was a revelation for me when I realized that if I could just hand over more responsibility to the students, think carefully about how to do it, and then hand it over, they would run the lesson and they would get even more from it. So
very good. Very good.
I think we need to finish because I'm aware of people's time. So I'm sorry that we haven't been able to maybe answer every question, but some of them are definitely whole new webinars in themselves. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. It's really exciting to see so many people here in the January webinar. I didn't expect, I don't know, that so many people would be here at this point of the year. I always find it a difficult time, but I suppose it depends where you are in different, people are from all over the world. January means different things to everybody, doesn't it?
Thank you, guys. I want to say thank you to Trinity, to Lucy for inviting me. And yes, thank you for everybody attending. It's been great. And I think this is an important issue that we needed to carry on talking. You know, never doubt yourself. Yes.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.